if you continue to do things which you are not good at, which don't come naturally to you, sometimes they help you make a lot of money, but you will not be very happy or satisfied.
True.
And to be success without satisfaction is no success at all.
Hello, people. Welcome to the community of the Growth Mindset podcast. Guys, if you are a first time listener, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening from so that you don't miss on more interesting episodes coming up in following weeks. And for our daily listeners, here we are again with a new episode where we will interview another interesting personality from a unique industry and understand how they were able to accomplish this great level of success. Remember, this is a podcast where we learn easy, practical methods and tips that we can implement in our daily lives from the very best and the most successful people known today. Because as we all know, success leaves clues. And we, the people having the growth mindset, will use these clues to create a better, more fulfilling, and a successful life. So, let the growth begin. First thing first, thank you so much, Hari, for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be on your podcast, Silawath.
Awesome. Mr. Hari, everybody knows you today in the Indian startup space, and anyway, you're also known as one of the very distinguished authors when it comes to writing books. And as I personally know and all about you because I've seen your career from the last couple of decades, what you've been doing with respect to different companies. You work with BigBasket, written multiple books, and also teach a lot of startups and board members for many places where you teach startups or help startups. Now, for people who might not know about your background, for instance, where were you born? What was your childhood like? Would you like to share how did all this story begin in the first place?
So I was born in Bangalore, and very soon after I was born, maybe a few months after that, my parents moved to a small town in the southern part of Orissa called Sunabeda. This was a public sector township where a factory was located. Hindustan Aeronautics Limited that made big engines was located. And that's the place I grew up from birth till I finished my 12th grade. And my father moved back to Bangalore actually after I almost finished my master's from IIM Calcutta. So I grew up largely in this small township. And public sector townships in India are an amazing place to raise a family. Extremely cosmopolitan. So I developed a cosmopolitan mindset since my childhood. I got to meet people from different parts of India, got to experience their cultures. English was the spoken language in school, was the language for communication in the town as such largely. So I think I grew in a very, very cosmopolitan atmosphere. Went to a Kendriya Vidyalaya that was run by the factory. And Kendriya Vidyalayas are, I think, one of India's greatest institutions. India has created some amazing institutions, Supreme Court, you have the judiciary, you have the parliament. I think the Kendriya Vidyalaya would also stand, as an equal there. I think it has been able to provide good education to, the lower middle classes across the country, very high quality education. So I think I experienced very good education right from my early days. And good set of friends. I loved the school thoroughly. And it was a small town. The population of the town was less than 25,000. So you can really imagine how small it must have been. You could walk one end of the town to the other, as part of your evening walk. That's how it was. It was in the middle of Eastern Ghats, nestled in the thick jungles of Eastern Ghats. So we got to see wild animals walking into the town in the middle of the night. So very beautiful. My childhood was overall good, I would say.
Interesting. And what about your parents? Were they always supportive, like saying whenever you wanted to do something with your life, any vision, any hobbies? Were they always supportive, or did you have to kind of, sometimes rebuttal and say no, maybe I want to do this? And how was that?
Yeah. So in terms of a family front, it was a bit of a broken family, I would say. So I looked for a lot of advice, consolation from outside my family. My parents were very, very ordinary. And I don't think they ever told me do this or don't do that. They themselves weren't sure, of the options available. But very quickly in school, I got interested in science, and very quickly within science, I began to love physics. So I continue to have a love for physics. I still read about cosmology, pick up the latest news items that, you see on your Google feed or your news feed.
Yeah.
So about the biggest black hole, the next biggest
Yeah.
black hole. I just lap up cosmology completely. So I continue to have an interest in physics. But at the same time, I also realized that physics is not going to, teaching physics in India is not a great proposition economically. So I decided to do engineering, which was the next best thing. And I wanted to do mechanical engineering from IIT Madras. That was my dream, because IIT Madras had been set up with German collaboration. The Germans are the best mechanical engineers in the world.
True.
So in many ways, my dream got fulfilled. I joined IIT Madras Mechanical Engineering in 1982. So that was it. So I think, yes, I've always been interested in science, wanted to be an engineer, and eventually ended up becoming an engineer.
Awesome. And then how did your professional journey begin? After you did engineering, and then you also did your master's from IIM Calcutta, right? So how did that journey start from? Where did you start working first? How was that?
The purpose of doing an MBA was not to get a foothold outside of engineering or escape or run away from engineering. The purpose was to get a more holistic understanding of how a business is run or how companies operate.
Got it.
And that was the reason for my joining IIM Calcutta. And I was very sure that after my MBA, I would join an engineering firm. And Tata Steel had come on campus, and it was also happened to be paying reasonably well at that point of time. And, pay is important for MBA students. So I picked Tata Steel. So Tata Steel was a place where I started my career. I was there for 14 years. First 11 years, I worked as a mechanical engineer, worked on the shop floor, thoroughly enjoyed it. Whatever I saw and read in textbooks, or at least some parts of what I saw and read in textbooks in college, I could experience that on the shop floor. And after about 11 years in engineering, I moved to human capital. And that move was more by accident. In large companies, people do switch, career tracks. It's very common for individuals to move from engineering to marketing, marketing to finance, so that they get a more holistic understanding of how companies are run. And at that point of time, Tata Steel was going through an existential crisis because CIS countries were dumping steel at prices that were below our costs. And we had to do something very dramatic in terms of changing the culture of the company, getting younger people, competent people into positions of responsibility, getting rid of the concept of seniority trumps everything else. We had to move to a regime where competence trumps everything else. We had to right size the company. We had 70,000 people producing less than 3.5 million tons of steel per annum. And similar steel plant would have operated with 7,000 people in Japan or the US. So we had to right size. And I was part of the core team that worked with McKinsey in terms of right sizing the company, restructuring the organization. And that was my foray into human capital. And at some point, I also felt that Tata Steel is not the right place for me because I was a bit of a rule breaker. And this company was too bureaucratic for my interests. So I moved on and joined the world of startups. For the last 19 years, I've been here, excited about being here. Every day has been a fun ride for me. It's a place I wish I had been from day one, but no worries. Every phase of life, every part of the journey is provide you a set of lessons. The last 19 years, almost 19 years, has been with a bunch of startups.
Yep. And then I see that you also, from engineering to HR, and then you also been a part of BigBasket initially when it was growing, right? So how did you think, or since you've been part of the core member team in BigBasket in terms of hiring the right people, how did they grow? Like, what do you think BigBasket did things right, which can help other companies as well?
So I would say that, you can be successful in many ways. For example, you can go to the field of science and find that Niels Bohr was successful, Einstein was successful. You can go to the field of management and you can find 100 people who are successful. But each of them is different. So, even in the area, of startups, BigBasket is a success, Flipkart is a success, Udaan is a success. So many of them are successful. We did. It doesn't mean that others can also become successful by what we did. So I think BigBasket's strength was that it was a very grounded company. And by saying a grounded company, I mean that the founders were, had a prior experience with doing a startup. They had made some mistakes. They had learned their lessons, as a result of which they were not carried away by the winds of fashion. The biggest problem that many youngsters, many younger founders may have is that they tend to get carried away by what investors are recommending, what investors are saying, because they may not have had the experience. So I think BigBasket's biggest strength was it remained a grounded company. Just to give you, an example of what it means. So you must have heard of, SoftBank and Tiger Global.
Yes.
Two very large, hedge funds, and very, very, in some ways, they changed the way investing was done in India. Tiger Global or SoftBank backed a startup. All other competitors would really get scared because they would pump in so much capital that this startup could then buy out all their customers and buy the customers of the competing companies who discounts, cashbacks, and the competitors would die. And they have been able to do this successfully, and this was the reputation they had. So they came to meet, Tiger Global actually came to meet, Leaf Excel came to meet the BigBasket team sometime in 2014. And within 15 minutes of the meeting, they pretty much said that your business model sucks because it's inventory-led, it's asset-heavy, and it won't scale easily. And those models which will scale are those which are asset-light and those which use a marketplace model. So we are likely to back those kind of models, and you will see that those kind of models will prevail. So the founders of BigBasket could have actually got scared, because the Pope and the church were telling them that the sun goes round the earth, so you better change your opinion and go with us. But the founders had experienced that, it's not true because the earth really went around the sun is what they knew.
True.
So they didn't change their opinion. So they stayed with an inventory-led model, asset-heavy model. And that decision to stay with this model was what, in fact, made BigBasket successful. That was one important strategic choice, because every other player who went down the path of asset-light model died along the way. One other player who survived, which is Grofers, they also very quickly pivoted to an inventory-led model. So I think being grounded, being sure about what you know is correct, sticking to it in difficult times, I think that is what was one differentiator. The other differentiator is that we were very customer-centric as a company, which is we asked a question: why does a customer shop with BigBasket? We answered the question very carefully, and we found that the reason why a customer shopped with BigBasket was because they wanted to avoid a visit to the store. So if a customer wants to avoid a visit to the physical store, then how do you need to design your business? So for example, if the customer orders 23 items and you can deliver only 21 items, you have to feel very unhappy because for the remaining 2 items, you're forcing the customer to go out to a physical store.
Correct.
And if the customer goes out to a store for those 2 items, the customer might as well buy the remaining 21 items also from the physical store. So we realized that, if we have to solve this problem of customer avoiding a visit, then you need to have 100% fill rate, which is if the customer orders 100 items, we can't deliver 99, we have to deliver 100. So that was one of the key, ways in which we built the business. We also said, what if the customer wants fruits and vegetables or ice cream and they have to go to a physical store, they can buy the dry grocery also from there. So that's how we decided to build a supply chain for fruits and vegetables. That's an extremely wicked supply chain. Nobody in the world has ever attempted a supply chain for online commerce. And we did that. It was very, very difficult, but we did that because we answered this question, which is why does a customer shop with BigBasket very thoughtfully? So I think if you ask me broadly, these were the 2 things that I can tell you 100 other things, but these 2 were predominantly responsible.
Got it. Now, taking a step forward towards your entrepreneur space and your journey in entrepreneurship and teaching startups, what do you think about the startup space today? How is it? Is it evolving, going back? Tell us about that.
So I'm very excited by the current state of entrepreneurship in India. I think entrepreneurship can be broken up in my mind, 4 phases. Post-independence, we can break it up into 4 phases. First phase was 1947 to 1991. That was the phase I would call the license control Raj, which is that only those who were from rich families who knew how to manipulate government policy and manage the system were successful. First-time entrepreneurs who were professionals would have found it very difficult to set up businesses in this era. 1991, India as a nation went bankrupt because of this approach, as a result of which we began liberalizing. And in a big way, we liberalized. Along with the liberalization and the Y2K opportunity. Y2K, I'm sure all of you know. Y2K is the problem that happened when all computers, the date was stored as the year was stored as a 2-digit number and not as a 4-digit number. So post liberalization, along with the Y2K opportunity, I think we were able to, as a nation, create first generation entrepreneurs who ended up creating multi-billion-dollar enterprises. There were people like Nandan Nilekani, Narayan Murthy, Azim Premji, Tech Mahindra. You had so many startups in the IT and business process outsourcing space. So this was, I would say, this second phase of entrepreneurship in India. The third phase is that starting in 2008, I think we began solving our own problems. So the previous phase was solving problems of Western countries using the low labor costs of India. We never bothered to solve Indian problems because we realized they were too complex and wicked and expensive to be solved. But I think with the starting of Flipkart, a lot of global capital, big capital, along with entrepreneurial energies, VC funds, the ecosystem, reached a tipping point because China was very successful and many of these VC funds, hedge funds had experienced huge success in China. So they realized the next macro story is India, and they came to India, and I think we reached the tipping point. So Flipkart was an inspiration to hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs. Starting a company became a startup, began getting day one slots on campuses. So it became amazing. So the fourth phase, I think, is really about, the third phase, I would say, solve problems for 70 million wealthy Indians in India. Flipkart and Ola are solving problems for the wealthy people in India, 70 million consumers in India. BigBasket is solving the problem of 70 million upper-end consumers in India. But all of these companies were struggling to solve problems for the next 400 million Indians because their price points were very different. Their performance expectations were very different. The solutions that were needed for them were very different. The basket value of their purchases were very different. So solving a problem economically was very difficult. But I think in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of work has been done in the area of technology. We have seen the coming together of mobile, broadband, and Aadhaar. These three things have created a terrific infrastructure to be able to address the problem of 400 million Indians in a very economic way. So, for example, take the payment space. Mobile, broadband, and Aadhaar have ensured that we are able to transfer money very easily, effortlessly. It is the country in the world where transferring money, moving money is the cheapest and the fastest. So I think a lot of these new technologies, new age technologies are helping new age entrepreneurs to solve problems for 400 million Indians. So just like cricket, in cricket you had the first 40 years, you had 80% of the time, which is nearly 33 times. Delhi and Mumbai won the Ranji Trophy. But then after that, last 10 years, you're finding Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, they're all winning the Ranji Trophy. Delhi, Mumbai. Now you're having entrepreneurs from Rafiganj in Bihar. You're having them from smaller towns in UP, smaller towns in Karnataka. So you have entrepreneurs from these small towns who are solving problems of communities that they belong to. So I think that's the fourth phase of entrepreneurship. I'm very excited by what's happening.
Interesting. My listeners primarily are from entrepreneur space. And since you've been in the startup space for close to 2 decades now, you have seen entrepreneurs making some mistakes over and over again, right? So what are some advice or some things that you can advise my entrepreneurs, the listeners of my podcast, my entrepreneurs, stating, okay, these are some practical or common mistakes that we have seen over and over entrepreneurs making, and how can they correct those?
See, I've put together a book, on this title, From Pony to Unicorn, Scaling a Startup Sustainably. So in this book, we have put together all our lessons, mine and Sanjeev Agarwal's, who was the founder of Daksh and the founder of Fundamentum. So we put together all the lessons that we have seen and we have experienced personally, and people we know very closely having experienced. So in this book, I'll just quickly talk about a small framework that we've developed. And that framework, I would say, you can use the two M's, the two F's, the two C's, the two S's, and H. The two M's mean that, the first M is being part of a big mega trend. So, for example, urban transportation being, completely disrupted using technology so that you could get a cab on demand was a mega trend. So revolutionizing of, urban transport where you could get a cab on demand was a mega trend.
Yeah.
So creating platforms, for example, a platform like Urban Company, where you had service providers on one end of the platform. They could be beauticians, they could be plumbers. And on the other side of the platform, you had consumers. So getting them together on one platform and, creating that, getting specific needs fulfilled by matching requirements was a mega trend. So I would say, being in the middle of a mega trend is very critical if you want to build a big company. But you don't have to always aim for building a big company. You could run a small company and be happy with it. But if you really do wish to build a scale company, it's important to be part of a mega trend. It's also important to be playing in a large market. If the market is not big, you cannot build billion-dollar enterprises.
True.
You need to have a large market. You need to be playing in a large market. So there are the two M's. The two S's are, the first S is making strategic choices. You need to make the right strategic choices. The example I gave you of BigBasket, which is we chose to go inventory heavy, even though, there were Tiger and Global, SoftBank were telling us that they won't work.
True.
So we made the right strategic choice. Make My Trip, for example, made the strategic choice of serving hotels or, entering the hotel space because they realized airlines and ticket booking is not an attractive business because the airlines don't need Make My Trip. They can sell tickets on their websites. There were just 5 or 6 airlines at that point of time. But hotels, there are hundreds and thousands of them across small towns in India, and they're very, very disaggregated. So if there was somebody who could help them get business, they would be willing to pay. So they made that pivot. So that was a strategic choice. The second S is strategic execution. Strategic execution is really about being able to get different pieces of operations, audits, training, process, all of them, and technology, get them together to dovetail in such a wonderful way that for somebody seeing it from outside, it does not even appear like innovation. So, for example, Amazon and BigBasket, right? You see them delivering orders, hundreds, thousands of them, millions of orders day in and day out.
Yeah.
But every time it works. Forget the rare exception. Most of the times it really works.
True.
And most of the time it creates outstanding customer experience. So how do these companies do it? And I would say that is strategic execution, which is bringing together technology, process, audits, people, training, all of them together to dovetail in a very seamless way to deliver outstanding customer experience. Then we come to the two F's. The first F is founder ambition. So it is difficult for a startup to be able to fight a global behemoth or a giant unless the founder is ambitious. So for example, Uber is a global behemoth. Ola was able to fight, Uber and go neck to neck with Uber both in India and overseas markets because of founder ambition.
Correct.
The founder allied with another, gorilla. So if Uber was a gorilla, Ola allied with SoftBank, which was an investing gorilla.
Yeah.
So similarly, BigBasket allied with Alibaba, which was a gorilla that competed globally with Amazon.
Yes.
So BigBasket took on Amazon by allying with Alibaba. So, if a founder is ambitious, there are many ways in which you can deal with gorillas. It's the David and Goliath story once again. Then the second F is foundation. So foundation is very critical. You cannot scale a business without building a good foundation. So you might scale a business for a short period of time. For a short period of time, you might even believe that, it's doing very well. And people in the world may believe you're a great company, but very quickly, the wheels are bound to come off. Yeah. So it's important to lay the foundation as well. So Snapdeal is a classic case where they grew without building the foundation. The net promoter scores were low, the assortment was poor, the customer experience was poor. They were just pumping in capital. So you can't always substitute, quality and customer experience with discounts and cashbacks. That doesn't always work.
True.
So that's about the second F, which is foundation. Then the two C's. Two C's are customer centricity and culture. We talked of customer centricity in the example of BigBasket. We started by asking the question, why does a customer shop with us, right? And we answered that very carefully, as a result of which we built a good business. The next C is culture. That's very important. So without the right kind of culture, it's impossible to build a great company. And culture can be built in very different ways, and different companies can have different culture. And no culture is right or wrong, excepting cultures which are blatantly toxic. So otherwise, no culture is good or bad, but you should avoid building toxic cultures. This was a classic example, Uber, where, things were going very well, but until one day, Susan Fowler, an employee of Uber, wrote a blog post in which she brought out the toxic elements of the Uber culture, the sexual harassment situations there. As a result of which Travis Kalanick, the boss, the founder CEO, had to be fired. So building the right kind of culture is very critical for a startup to scale. The last thing is obviously the human capital side, the H, which is very, very, in some ways, the most important, and in some ways also the most difficult for most founders, because a lot of the learnings in the human capital side come through experience. And the human capital has several issues. When do you bring in your lateral hires at senior levels?
Correct.
How do you interview lateral hires? How do you spot the red flags in hiring? When do you promote internally, and when do you not promote internally? How do you let go of employees, in a very dignified way? So there are several issues in human capital side as well. So you need to understand that. So in summary, it is you need to get the two M's, the two S's, the two F's, the two C's, and the H of scaling the startup.
Wow, that was a very detailed and an awesome explanation for my listeners, and I'm sure they can benefit this. And again, guys, anybody who wants to get more details, get the book. I will put in the description of the book on the podcast link as well, so that I can go ahead and get that book, understand how you can scale your startup, which can help you uncover hidden potentials for your organization and for your whole dreams. Now, you yourself, Hari, have played different roles. You wore different caps, right? You've juggled between them.
Right.
You've been an author, investor, advisor, mentor. Amazing. But if I had to ask you personally, by far, which cap is the most closest to you? Where do you find most satisfaction and fulfillment, and why?
I think I find fulfillment in almost all of these equally, Silawath. So I know what I've looked at success as having peace of mind. And peace of mind to me comes largely by doing what I'm good at every day. So if you continue to do things which you're not good at, which don't come naturally to you, sometimes they help you make a lot of money, but you will not be very happy or satisfied.
True.
And to be success without satisfaction is no success at all.
Yeah.
So you can have success with satisfaction with money, or you can have success with satisfaction. Sometimes you may not make a great deal of money, but to me that is success. So eventually satisfaction to me every day is a core component of success. I've thoroughly enjoyed writing books. I've thoroughly enjoyed being a sounding board to young entrepreneurs. I've thoroughly enjoyed angel investing or investing in general, along with Fundamentum or Arkham Ventures, where I get to talk to entrepreneurs with fire in their belly, with stars in their eyes, coming with brilliant ideas. So I love listening to them, love to see their passion, and playing brain tennis with them. So all of this, I love everything. So I love everything that I'm currently doing.
Nice. Now, for people or entrepreneurs who want to go ahead and look for investors, what should be the right approach for them? How can they reach out, or what should be their game plan in terms of finding investors for their startup?
I would say, that if you have a good idea, if you execute well, if you get some initial traction in terms of very happy, delighted customers, you don't have to look for investors. Investors will look for you. The only job of investors is to sniff out smart entrepreneurs who are solving real problems.
Yeah.
So I would say don't look for investors. Focus on solving a good problem, creating initial traction, being very passionate about customer experience, and investors will find you.
Interesting. There are two questions that I want to ask you in specific as well. Now, first one being around the lines of an author. You're an author, you're writing books, as well as also juggling between multiple things. So how do you plan, or how do you set yourself up for writing a book, or let's say if you want to sit and write? What's your schedule like? How do you plan your books? How do you write?
So far, my books have all been based on my experience. So, for example, Pony to Unicorn is about scaling a business. I have seen the scaling journey for the last 19 years. Prior to that was a book titled, Saying No to Jugaad, the Making of BigBasket, was my personal experience. Prior to that, along with Pony to Unicorn, I also wrote a book titled Sailing Through a Storm, Making a Crisis Work for You. Largely, from my own personal experiences. So I think I have lived my life keeping my eyes and ears open and assimilated a lot of lessons. And these books are, for me, many of these lessons, just finding a place, finding expression, finding an outlet. In 2021, I would be writing 2 more books, but both these books are a bit outside of my comfort zone and very different from the previous books because they
Okay.
don't necessarily stem from a lot of personal experience. So they involve doing research and talking
Yes.
to a lot of people.
Hmm.
So I talk, for example, the one book that's coming out in June is titled Diversity Beyond Tokenism.
Okay.
Why being politically correct is not helpful to anyone. So diversity beyond tokenism. So I researched the subject a lot and I had some ideas, and I was always very skeptical about many diversity initiatives that companies were launching or the lazy drivel around the topic of diversity. And therefore I decided, let me write one. I co-authored this with, Swati Jena. She's an amazing lady. In fact, she actually inspired me to be her co-author. And this book will be out in June. The next book, which I'm writing with a co-author, is about Middle India. I talked to you about 400 million Indians,
Yes.
right? How the confluence of broadband, mobile, and Aadhaar is coming together
Correct.
to create a new age of entrepreneurship, where entrepreneurs from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 towns of India are solving problems for their own communities using technology, Aadhaar, and broadband.
Yeah.
So that's the next book.
And how do you set yourself up for a book? For example, as you said, for some you do research, but do you set a time for that? Because I know you're a busy man, but
not really. I have been pretty rapid in terms of writing my books. I have been prolific. 2017, I wrote a book. 18, I wrote a book. 19, 1, 20, it will be 2, 21, 2.
Correct.
So I don't set timelines. I would say I generally write fairly quickly, fast, because it's about writing is to me, you can write well if you can think well. So I think that's a prerequisite. So I believe in thinking very clearly, thinking in an uncluttered way. Don't clutter my brain. And writing in a very simple way, dejargonized way, explaining things in a way that a 10-year-old would understand. That's my objective. If a 10-year-old can't understand, then I haven't explained it well enough. If it needs an expert to understand, then it's all jargon.
Exactly.
So I believe that you need to think very clearly, and writing will be quick then.
And do you write in one go, or do you set some time? Saying for the first half of the day, maybe 2 hours, I'm gonna sit and gonna spend this.
No. I am very flexible. I have no timetables at all.
Okay.
I have absolutely no timetables.
Interesting. All right. And one last question that I have for you, Harry. This is a question that I ask almost all the guests that have been on my podcast, right? For this, let's imagine now, I know you're already doing a lot of things which you love and you're finding satisfaction, which is great, right? Not everybody feels that way, and I'm happy to hear that you're able to do and deliver that. But let's assume after 20, 30 years from now, you're still able to have a bigger impact, written more books, helped a lot of other entrepreneurs as well, and had a great impact on Indian society as a whole, the startup and the world. But now it's time for you to say goodbye to this world, and you can leave only 2 pieces of advice to this world. It could be a professional person, anything that could leave them with, making sure that they live a happy and a fulfilling life. What those 2 advice will be for everybody?
Very difficult to give any kind of advice, Silawath. I would say that, do things that you like. Life is too short to be pursuing things that you don't like just because some things will give you a lot of money. I would say that do things that you like to the extent possible. I would say that's one piece of advice. And the other thing is maybe, as you pass, as you go through a career, there will be signals along the way that will help you figure out what next to do. So, for example, I have done all these things writing. How did these things arise in my mind? I think there were different clues, signals along the way that told me that you could write. There were, sometimes it could be somebody who could make a comment that I really love the way you write. And that comment, if 2, 3 people independently make that, that's an indication that you really write well. And it's a signal that, maybe you should consider writing more. So I think there are signals all along the way. You should just learn to train your mind to spot these signals and follow them. And I think you will then be happy.
Awesome. Perfect. Mr. Hari, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It has been an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Silawath. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
This brings us to the end of this episode and hope you at least had one takeaway from this interview. If you have any questions or want to talk to me personally, you can find me at www.silawathirshad.com. See you soon.